I'm Brianna Shigo. Welcome back to my Tuesday tips. Today is Wednesday. Who cares? Page 14. Let's get right into it. Starting from the top, letter B, lead disclosures. Basically, if your home was built or painted before 1978, there's a possibility that your paint is lead-based, and you reserve the right to know everything about that. And you also reserve the right as the buyer to do any kind of risk assessment or testing the paint for lead. Moving on, letters C and D, home fire hardening disclosure and advisory, and defensible space disclosure and addendum. Basically, if your home is in a high fire hazard zone, you need to receive special disclosures and be aware of all the risks that come with it. E says waiver prohibited, so it is prohibited by law for you to waive your right to see and receive any of these disclosures that we just talked about, like the lead-based paint or the fire hazard. You have to receive it, you should read it and really understand what you're getting yourself into. Letter F, return of signed copies. This basically says that you either have until the timeline that you specified in your contracts, remember all the contingencies and all those days and everything, you specified that you would return things in a certain amount of days, okay? Or if the seller really lags on getting you all of the disclosures and it's super late and you're like, what the heck? You have 5 days after the seller gives them to you. So let's say your deadline was like 3 days ago that you originally wrote in your contract, but the seller just sent you all the disclosures. So you have 5 days from today to read those, sign them, and return them. Letter G, termination rights. So the first one says statutory and other disclosures. So basically, if the seller gets the buyer all of the disclosures via email or in person, whatever form that may be, the buyer has those however many days to read them, sign them, and return them. Let's say it's 5 days. If the buyer decides on the 6th day, I don't like something in the disclosures, they can't cancel because of the disclosures. Because you had your specified time period that you had to do all of this, and then you went over that, and then you decide that you don't want to do it. It doesn't work like that. You have to follow the timelines. The second one, the defensible space compliance thing, is one of those really intense fire hazard things, and it's basically talking about if the buyer doesn't want to sign something or if they refuse to sign something, the seller has the right to cancel after delivering a notice to perform, which is basically the seller telling the buyer, you have to send this to me right now. And the buyer will still be like, am I going to send it? Then the seller's like, okay, fine. And they cancel. Letter H, withholding taxes. The buyer and seller are giving the escrow holder permission to withhold taxes that would comply with the federal and state level unless you submit some kind of affidavit, and there's lots of ands and ors and ands and ors about paperwork that you could submit, but basically escrow would withhold your taxes. Letter I, Megan's Law Database. This basically just lets you know that there is a website, www.meganslaw.ca.gov, that you can go on to see if there are any registered sex offenders in the location area of where you are trying to purchase a home, just so you can do your due diligence and look it up and be aware of anything like that around where you would be potentially living. Letter J, notice regarding gas and hazardous liquid transmission pipelines. This just basically tells you that there's yet another website where you can go and see a map of all of these hazardous liquid transmission pipelines and see if the home that you're trying to purchase is within those pipelines, and you can see whether or not you'd have a problem with that. Letter K, natural and environmental hazards. So if you hear me say NHD, natural hazard disclosure, that's what this is talking about. It just talks about there's earthquake hazard disclosures, flood, fire, seismic hazard zone, earthquake fault zone, all these kinds of disclosures that your home could possibly be in one of these areas. So basically, if your home that you're trying to buy is in one of these areas, you will receive these disclosures. Last but not least, letter L, condominium and planned development disclosures. So basically the seller has to tell you if the unit is in a condominium development or planned unit development, okay? And then they have to get you all of the CCRs, the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Those are like your HOA rules. And then they also have to get you a big packet of HOA information, like your parking information, smoking information, pets information, HOA contact information, past notes from like HOA meetings and stuff. So they just have to make sure they set you up for success with all of that stuff and let you know what you're getting into HOA-wise. So that was page 14 and a little bit of 15, but we're getting there, we're getting through it. Hopefully it is easier for you guys to understand after I explain things a little bit, but as always, if you have any questions or would like any further explanation on things, you can always reach out to me and I'll be here and I'll be more than happy to answer anything that you have.